Be a well-rounded climber.
Why?
Because it's good.
How come?
Well, you always be prepared for anything.
I just want to climb overhangs.
Well, you should really work if on your slab.
I will never climb slab.
And then that will always be your weakness.
But I crush you on overhangs though, huh?
But I crush you on slab.
But you don't crush that slab specialist or this overhang specialist.
You are not a balanced climber.
You are a mediocre at everything climber.
Spread too thin and you got no impact of flavors.
So for a very long time, I was working on my half crimp and full crimp because they were my total weakness.
But you know what I forgot to do? I totally neglected my strongest grip of the open hand. And then you know what I realized?
When you're climbing on the wall, you always rely on your strengths to get you through the problem.
So wouldn't it make sense to work on your strengths to as high as possible of a level
and then build your climbing style around your strengths and not so much your weaknesses?
For example, I am flexible.
I like to think I am more flexible than the average balanced climber, whatever that means. My flexibility is definitely a strength of mine, I would say.
But when I climb, should I climb like a balanced climber with below flexibility of me? No, that would be ridiculous.
And when I train, should I not train my strength or flexibility?
No, that too would be redonkulous.
So the question is, how much time, energy, and effort should you allocate into training your strength training and training your weakness training? And I do think it should be in accordance with your goals.
But more so, I also think if you become excellent in one,
then that one will always spill out to the other remaining categories. So I think the best idea here is to raise all these categories to a base level of comfort. Now I use the word comfort because it's very easily to decide people's weaknesses and strength based off of this word. Example, most people's weakness is roof and cave climbing. You mention roof and cave climbing and they shrink away like the light. But you mention slab and they brighten up like my precious. But a balanced climber, in my opinion, no matter the angle or the style of climbing you mentioned, they simply just shrug and say, I guess I'll do it. I mean, I prefer something else, but I could do this. There's no fear in his tone. There's only a strong preference to do something else. And once you're in that preference phase of everything, that's when you know that all your base stats are relatively high. But it is also very hard to get all your base stats to a level that is at a comfort level. I remember for me, the first time I hopped on the Moonboard, completely shut down. It took me like maybe a year and a half just to get comfortable climbing at that 40-degree angle. And now you may be wondering, which weakness should you work on? Finger strength, flexibility, endurance. And this is a pretty funny question because most people know what their weaknesses are, but a lot of people don't know what their strengths are because most people view their strength as comfort, and comfort is generally a normal feeling unless you like to live dangerously. But normal feelings you don't really pay attention to. Not like you do your weaknesses. When you know you can't get your leg up, you know that's a flexibility issue. When you constantly can't get your leg up, you know that's a total weakness of yours. Mayhaps you should work on it, nay? Because working on your weakness will yield the quickest gains for your climbing currently.
Imagine you went from this to this.
You gon' feel that on the wall, I tell if you what.
And then keep working on it until it becomes comfortable, until it's just an option in your arsenal of weapons for you to choose to use if you wish.
Personally, for me, once I finally unlocked the full crimp and I was able to do it feasibly on the wall, I was just a much better climber. Do I use the full crimp all the time? No, open hand still. But there are some holes that's just better used in the full crimp, and I have that option. It is no longer what we call a weakness, but it's definitely not a strength.
But also, keep working on your strength like it's your full-time job. It's your bread and butter. Keep eating. There's a reason why technical climbers are technical. It's not for a lack of power, but it's more so an abundance of technique that does not require them to garner a strength of power. And why would you if your climbing style dictates you don't need to? In climbing, there's no stat that is required for climbing, and especially not climbing in the way that you so dictate to climb. But here's the thing, because a balanced climber to me is just a climber who has a large amount of options. And a climber who's really good at one thing may only need one option. So ideally, you want to aim to be a balanced climber who's really good at one or two things. My strengths are long, overhanging, power, endurance type boulder problems with a good fall zone. My weaknesses is anything small, crimpy, short, and powerful on overhang. Now you may have noticed I said a good fall zone with a good fall zone, because a weakness or strength can be a mental thing as well. The ability to try hard is a skill. The ability to manage the fear and commit to a very committing move is a skill. And sometimes you might be maxed out on the physical side of things, but you go climbing outdoors and all of a sudden all your physical stats are cut in half because you're afraid to climb high.
And which is harder to overcome, mental or physical weakness? And the answer is whichever one you keep avoiding the most. Story time. I remember my first time on ropes outdoors. I was utterly terrified. I was so scared of rope climbing that once I got to the ground, I was gonna quit rope climbing forever. Do you know that feeling you get when you're walking in the dark at 2 a.m. and you look down a dark hallway or alley and you're like, I probably shouldn't go into it? Well, I was in the thick of things and I didn't like it one bit. But do you remember when I said, if you become excellent in one, then that one will always spill out to the other remaining categories? Well, I was really strong and I just kept telling myself, it's only a 5-10. Every hold is a jug. If I slip, I could hold on to any hold on this route with one hand. I'll be fine. And so I compensated for my weakness of this immense fear with my great insurmountable strength that I garnered from bouldering. But that's not the end of the story, because I was invited to go rope climbing again. I absolutely wanted to refuse. What's the matter, Potter? Scared? Yeah, but that mental weakness of fear of mine was too great for me to ignore. And so I went, and over time I slowly overcame that fear of mine. And now rope climbing to me is just a preference that I prefer not to do. I could do it reluctantly, but it is not a weakness of mine. Granted, definitely not a strength. And that right there elevated my climbing. Though it was all mental, the spillage of working on my weakness really enhanced the rest of my climbing. It felt like, to me at least. So I believe working on your weakest weakness and strengthening your strongest strength is possibly the best way to go about allocating your time, because you eliminate your fatal flaw and you boost who you really are. But again, how much time, effort, energy should you allocate into each individual category? Chronically speaking, I think when you first start working on your weakest weakness, you should spend about 30% of your time, energy, and effort working on it, because 1, you're not that great at it. 2, you can't put in that much energy to something you're not great at. And 3, it's gonna suck and you don't want to spend that much time doing it. Once you're slowly approaching the semi-comfortable phase of it though, you should really bump it up to 50% in order to solidify inside your mind that this is something that you're good at, and now it's just more of an option and a preference. Therefore, you want to start hammering it, and also you're better at it so you can hammer it harder. And once you can finally solidly look at your weakness like it's just another option, like it's a comfort level that you just really don't want to do, I would drop it down to about 5 to 10%, because you really still want to focus most of your predominant time on your strength. And then at this point in time, you're just maintaining your comfort level of your weakness, and it'll slowly rise as all your other stats rise in accordance next to it. I don't see or have a need or belief in turning a weakness into a strength. At the end of the day, everyone has a bias when it comes to climbing. I feel like it's a lot like telling a right-handed person to become left-handed because that's their weakness. No, I think that's dumb. To sum everything up, your strength must be known to everyone. Your weaknesses should be a mystery to everyone. If given the chance to be mediocre at everything or great at one, become great at one, not because it's the best climbing option, but because it is the option that will give you the most joy when it comes to climbing. And believe it or not, the greatest strength you can have is an unrefined joy of climbing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, partner.